the texts that truly shape us, they're often the ones that confront us with
Yeah.
the rawest aspects of human pain and faith.
hmm
Today, we are taking on one of the most short yet explosive pieces of ancient poetry, Psalm 137.
It's just 9 verses, but it packs such a punch.
It really does. It chronicles one of the most devastating periods in Israelite history, the
Mhm.
Babylonian exile. And it captures emotions that, well, they range from paralyzing sorrow to the most demanding cry for retribution.
And it's an essential piece of scripture for understanding how faith endures under catastrophic duress.
Mhm.
We're not treating this as just an ancient historical document.
No.
We are entering into a visceral spiritual journey through loss, betrayal, and the quest for divine justice. It's all in there.
Our sources for this deep dive are rigorous, and we'll be using the comprehensive analysis, particularly the insights and the actionable applications curated by the You Need Faith in Jesus team.
And their work is so good at emphasizing the connection between that crushing historical reality of the 6th century BC and its relevance for the modern believer facing what they call a spiritual exile.
Exactly. So that's our mission today.
Right, to synthesize that historical setting, the enormous theological weight, and those crucial practical applications that are embedded in every single line.
This is a deliberate, teaching-focused exploration. We're going verse by verse from the weeping despair of Psalm 137, verse 1.
All the way through to the extremely difficult but essential theological resolution found in verse 9.
It's heavy material, for sure.
It is, but it's vital for anyone seeking resilience in a complicated world.
Okay, let's unpack this intense experience of exile, starting right where the psalmist places us, at the physical location of their greatest grief. The opening of this psalm, it doesn't offer any gentle preamble, does it?
Not at all. It immediately immerses you in a scene of desolation and despair.
The first verse just establishes the location and the core emotion with such stark precision. Let's read the full King James Version quote and reference. It's Psalm 137, verse 1.
By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yeah, we wept when we remembered Zion.
There we sat down. That image is one of passive, comprehensive despair.
Absolutely. They weren't walking or striving. They sat down. That suggests an overwhelming weariness, a moment where the physical effort of resistance had just ceased.
And all that's left is the reality of their captivity.
Yes. This is after the final siege of Jerusalem in 586 BC, the destruction of Solomon's temple.
And the forced march of the surviving population hundreds of miles eastward, the trauma was immense.
Exactly.
When the text specifies the rivers of Babylon, it's easy to picture, a single pastoral riverbank.
Right.
But the reality, as detailed in our sources, was far more complex and strategically significant.
It absolutely was. We're talking about the geopolitical heartland of the Neo-Babylonian Empire.
So the Tigris and Euphrates.
The Tigris and Euphrates were central. But the genius of Babylon, particularly under rulers like Nebuchadnezzar II, lay in their extensive engineered canal network. These waterways were the literal lifeblood of the empire. They provided irrigation for massive agricultural production, they facilitated commerce, and they served as strategic defenses.
So sitting by these rivers meant being surrounded by the very evidence of their captors' power and prosperity.
Yes, it wasn't a peaceful place of retreat at all.
It was a constant, painful reminder.
Every single day, they sat amidst the engineered fertility and monumental architecture of the empire that had just annihilated their own civilization.
So the wealth and success of Babylon just made their own defeat and displacement feel infinitely worse.
Infinitely. They were surrounded by the vitality of their enemy, and that leads directly to the source of their weeping, remembering Zion.
And the source material stresses that this weeping wasn't just simple homesickness.
No, not at all. As painful as that is, it doesn't capture the full theological weight of what's happening here.
So what did Zion truly represent to them?
Well, Zion is Jerusalem, but on a spiritual map, it represented so much more than a geographical location. It was the specific place God had chosen to place his name.
Deuteronomy 12.5.
Exactly. It housed the temple, the physical focal point where God's visible presence, the Shekinah glory, was manifested and where atonement was performed.
So when they wept remembering Zion, they were grieving the loss of everything.
Everything. The loss of the temple, the covenant center, their identity as a free, holy nation, and, most crushingly, the visible signs of God's intimate presence among them.
It's the grief over a ruptured relationship, not just a lost city.
Precisely. The sorrow is deeply covenantal. And the analysis provided by the UNFIJ team doesn't allow for any softening of the historical causality here.
What do they emphasize?
They emphasize that this devastating sorrow was a direct consequence of the nation's persistent sin.
That's a crucial and a painful truth to confront.
It is.
The exile was a judicial act, a promised consequence of breaking the covenant. How does that knowledge that their own actions led them to those weeping riverbanks, how does that layer into the depth of their grief?
Oh, it complicates the grief immensely. It adds guilt, regret, and this deep fear that they had exhausted God's patience.
And the prophets had warned them.
Relentlessly.
Yeah.
Jeremiah, Ezekiel, they had warned them that this was coming because of idolatry, injustice, and relying on worldly alliances rather than divine faithfulness.
So to sit in Babylon was to realize inescapably that the prophets had been right.
And that their persistent unfaithfulness was the root of their disaster.
So we have this foundational scene, profound grief, displacement, being surrounded by the enemy's success, and this deep realization that their own choices brought them here. How does the modern application framework from the You Need Faith in Jesus team validate this level of sorrow for us today?
Well, the You Need Faith in Jesus team is keen to validate the legitimacy of that raw grief. They observe that this verse gives us permission for honest sorrow in our walk.
So we're not commanded to be emotionally detached Stoics.
Not at all. We all face seasons of exile, and those can be profound. The loss of a foundational relationship, a crippling professional failure, persistent spiritual dryness.
Or even just that pervasive feeling that our values are entirely alien to the culture around us.
Exactly. The world often pressures us to move on or stay positive, but Psalm 137 seems to suggest that sitting down and weeping is a necessary step.
More than necessary, even appropriate.
Yes, appropriate. The practical step derived from this verse, according to the You Need Faith in Jesus team, is the critical action of being truthful with God about our pain.
He is fully present in our tears.
Absolutely. We don't need to put on a mask of false strength. Admitting I am sitting down and weeping by my personal river of Babylon, that is the first step toward genuine engagement with restoration.
Honesty is the prerequisite for transformation.
It is.
And the sources provide such a compelling New Testament connection here, tying the psalmist's tears to the Lord himself.
This point is so powerful because it shows that even divine perfection permits grief. We look at Luke chapter 19, verse 41.
Let's hear it.
It reads, "And when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it."
Jesus weeping over Jerusalem.
Yeah.
He was witnessing the spiritual separation and future devastation caused by unbelief. It's a mirror of the grief of the exiles centuries before.
It's the ultimate divine affirmation that profound sorrow for loss, especially spiritual loss, is not a sign of weakness.
It's a sign of deep connection and commitment.
Exactly. And the You Need Faith in Jesus team uses this to combat the false notion that faith requires perpetual manufactured happiness. Jesus grieved profoundly. That pattern validates our own tears.
Though we sit, we weep, and we remember Zion.
And that memory, even if it's painful, becomes the anchor of future hope.
Yeah.
It's the only thing they could control in Babylon.
Right. They couldn't control the Babylonians. They couldn't rebuild the temple. They couldn't undo the past sin.
But they could control where their heart and mind were fixed.
The memory of God's faithfulness, the sanctity of Zion, that was the source of their agony, but also, paradoxically, the only guarantee of their future.
Precisely.
That opening sense of sorrow and weeping, it transitions immediately into a symbolic refusal in the second verse.
Yes. The tears have been shed, and now they choose silence.
And the abandonment of music is a huge statement in this culture.
Massive.
Let's look at the full verse. It's Psalm 137, verse 2.
"We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof."
That is just a devastating visual image, signaling a kind of spiritual shutdown.
It is. And to understand its gravity, we have to understand the centrality of music in ancient Israelite worship. The harps, the kinorim, they weren't peripheral instruments.
No, they were central to the temple liturgy. King David himself was the great harpist.
Exactly. These instruments represented joyful praise, public celebration, and the audible expression of their covenant relationship with God.
And they deliberately hung them up. Why the willows specifically?
Well, the willows, as our comprehensive analysis notes, they commonly grew along the water systems, the rivers of Babylon, and they were often associated with mourning in ancient poetry.
So by hanging the harps there, they were symbolically declaring the immediate cessation of their music of praise.
Yes, the joy, the gladness commanded in worship, had been completely extinguished by the tragedy. They had nothing left to sing with joy.
It's both an enforced silence The environment stifled their joy and, more importantly, a chosen one.
That chosen aspect is vital.
And the sources highlight this as a critical act of protest.
They do. The You Need Faith in Jesus team emphasizes that this act is a profound, silent protest. They were saying, our songs belong to God alone.
We will not use these instruments consecrated to divine worship for entertainment in a foreign, pagan, hostile context.
Precisely. Their refusal declared that their worship was sacred, not a commodity to be profaned on demand.
And that brings us to the application provided by the You Need Faith in Jesus team.
Mhm.
They are very realistic about this silent harp experience in the life of a modern believer.
They offer deep insight here. They acknowledge that seasons of profound hardship or deep pain, illness, betrayal, long periods of doubt can make the emotional capacity for praise feel absolutely impossible.
There are moments when our spiritual harps are hung up and silent.
Yes. And the key takeaway that the You Need Faith in Jesus team stresses is that this internal silence, this feeling of spiritual emptiness, is not a failure of faith.
That's so important.
It is. It's an honest expression of a heavy, overwhelmed human heart. It normalizes the struggle.
So, if the feeling of praise is absent and the spiritual harp is silent, what's the action step? If we can't sing, what does the analysis from the You Need Faith in Jesus team suggest we should do?
The action is not to fake the joy. It's to engage in cognitive loyalty. The practical step is to maintain the memory of Zion.
So even in the silence, we hold fast to the memory of God's goodness, his historical faithfulness, and the immutable hope of restoration through Christ.
That's it. The commitment to God's reality and the truth of the gospel remains, even when the feeling or the ability to praise with gladness has temporarily fled.
It's the difference between emotional worship, which is contingent on mood, and intentional, steadfast commitment, which transcends feeling.
Right. And if we reflect on the contrast between this silence and the ideal state of worship, the tragedy of exile becomes even clearer. We recall the command in Psalm 100, verse 2.
Let's hear it.
Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing.
The exile has made that commanded gladness literally unattainable for them.
Exactly. And yet, in the midst of that unattainable joy, the psalmist's silence is an act of spiritual maintenance, protecting the integrity of the song.
And the analysis from the You Need Faith in Jesus team encourages us not to feel guilt over the silence, but to use that quiet time to refocus on the unchangeable character of God.
Yes, the physical harps were silent, but the inward commitment to the purpose of those harps' worship remained fierce. We can use our silent seasons to affirm that the source of our praise is God, not our current comfort.
In other words, when our instruments are hung up, we use that quiet to remember why we were given the instruments in the first place, for God's glory.
It's an exercise in deep internal fortitude. The pain is real, the silence is honest. But the memory of Zion is the unshakable foundation that prevents total assimilation into Babylon.
The narrative shifts again here, moving from the internal, the sorrow, and the chosen silence to external malice.
The Babylonian captors, noticing the silence, intensify their cruelty by exploiting the Israelites' pain.
Let's read verse 3, where the antagonists enter the scene. Psalm 137, verse 3.
For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion.
This is just a perfect example of psychological warfare.
It is. The Babylonians, they that wasted us, meaning they had destroyed and plundered everything, now they demand entertainment.
And not just a song, but mirth.
Yes, mirth. It's a calculated move to rub salt in the open wound of their loss and their spiritual humiliation.
And the specificity of their demand is so crucial. Sing us one of the songs of Zion.
Absolutely. They weren't asking for a simple folk tune. They knew exactly what would violate their prisoner's core.
That's the pivotal insight from our sources. The songs of Zion were the sacred hymns, the psalms themselves, which praised Yahweh, chronicled his mighty redemptive acts.
And celebrated the uniqueness of the covenant. To sing these holy songs for the amusement of pagan captors who served idols and actively mocked the God of Israel would be to cheapen, profane, and degrade their sacred worship into a mere commodity.
A novelty act.
A novelty act. It's an attempt to force them to violate the holiness they had just protected by hanging up their harps. It's cultural and spiritual degradation.
The goal was spiritual humiliation, forcing them to use their worship as a tool for their conqueror's pleasure.
Exactly.
The You Need Faith in Jesus team draws a compelling parallel here to the modern experience of faith.
It's a highly relevant modern challenge. The world system often demands that we perform our beliefs for its approval.
But only if they are repackaged as something palatable, non-committal, entertaining.
Right. It wants faith sanitized, free of conviction, or just presented as a means to personal achievement. If we insist on the biblical truth, the hard doctrines, the call to repentance, the claims of Christ's exclusive lordship, we face criticism and contempt.
The demand for mirth is the demand for compromise.
That's it. So, if the world attempts to make us perform our faith cynically, what is the practical step the You Need Faith in Jesus team advises?
What's the action here for guarding what is holy?
The practical action is to guard the sanctity of our worship and conviction. The You Need Faith in Jesus team stresses that our deepest devotion and worship are for God alone. They must not be turned into a commodity or placed on cynical public display.
And that requires enormous wisdom.
It does. Discerning the difference between offering a genuine, sincere witness of the gospel and yielding to a cynical taunt designed to mock and undermine our faith.
Our witness must be given, but our sacred core must be protected.
Exactly. And that necessity of protecting the vulnerable is even reflected in the wisdom literature of the Old Testament.
Which verse are we talking about?
The source analysis points us to Proverbs 25, verse 20. It's a powerful condemnation of this kind of malice.
Let's read it.
The verse reads, "As he that taketh away a garment in cold weather, and his vinegar upon nitre, so is he that singeth songs to a heavy heart."
Wow. That captures the profound inappropriateness and inherent malice of demanding a joyful song from those ravaged by devastation.
It's an act of calculated cruelty. It equates demanding mirth from a heavy heart to removing vital protection, a garment in the cold, or applying an irritant like vinegar on a raw wound.
It's spiritual violence.
It is. And the takeaway, as highlighted by the You Need Faith in Jesus team, is that often the most profound act of sacred loyalty is that refusal maintaining silence. To ensure the integrity of our relationship with God is not compromised for the momentary amusement or approval of the strange land.
The challenge for the listener, then, is to identify where modern Babylon attempts to cheapen their convictions and to maintain the refusal of Psalm 137.
It requires a sharp ethical eye. When the world demands you turn your Song of Zion into a simple compromise jingle, the response of this psalm is the necessary safeguard. Your loyalty is not for sale or for performance.
Okay, so all the elements we've discussed, the weeping, the refusal, the mockery, they all culminate in the central, heartbroken question of the psalm.
Yes, this is the existential crisis that defined their spiritual condition.
The verse is so simple, yet its theological implications are massive. Psalm 137, verse 4.
How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land?
That rhetorical question just encapsulates the psalmist's profound sense of theological contradiction.
It does. It wasn't merely a logistical difficulty. It was a matter of spiritual integrity under the Old Covenant. The Lord's song belongs specifically to the covenant community, offered in the sacred space of the temple within the Lord's promised land.
So to sing it in Babylon, a strange land dedicated to idols, it felt like a betrayal. They were defeated. How could they authentically sing of God's supreme victory?
That's the crux of the problem. Their circumstances, defeat, chains, displacement seemed to violently contradict the message of the songs, which praised an all-powerful, victorious God. It's the definition of spiritual cognitive dissonance.
For the modern believer, if we accept that the world is our spiritual strange land, a place where values and priorities often actively oppose the kingdom of God, how does this question challenge us?
Well, the You Need Faith in Jesus team frames this as the challenge to authenticity and witness. The question becomes, how can we live truly, radically, authentically for Christ and worship sincerely in environments that are secular, cynical, or antagonistic?
We have to constantly ask ourselves if we are adapting the song to fit the strange land, or if we are maintaining the integrity of the song, even if it sounds dissonant to the world.
Exactly. The psalmist felt the answer was we can't, implying a necessary silence. But the application framework requires us to find a way to maintain our witness.
So what's the practical action derived from this challenge?
The action is to intentionally maintain our position as citizens of Zion, even while residing in Babylon. Our analysis points to the enduring example of Daniel.
Who was also a high-level captive in Babylon.
Yes, and Daniel consciously positioned his life opening his window toward Jerusalem 3 times a day to reflect that his ultimate allegiance lay elsewhere.
So the practical step is actively positioning our lives to reflect that our ultimate citizenship is in heaven. We are residents, not citizens, of the strange land.
Precisely. This involves intentional choices about how we spend our time, what media we consume, where we invest our energy, constantly checking our loyalties against the priorities of the kingdom.
And what's remarkable is that the divine answer to this impossible question was actually delivered to another contemporary exile.
The prophet Ezekiel, yes. The You Need Faith in Jesus team highlights this as the theological resolution.
It's the powerful turning point.
It is. Ezekiel, sitting by the Shubar Canal in Babylon, received the word of the Lord in Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 16, where God promises,
Yet will I be to them as a little sanctuary in the countries where they shall come.
think about that. God himself becomes the place of worship.
The physical temple is destroyed, but the sanctuary is no longer dependent on the location.
This is a profound foreshadowing of the new covenant. The Lord, in his sovereign grace, resolves the crisis of locality. He promises to be a personal, immediate, spiritual sanctuary to his people, regardless of geography or physical displacement.
So the question, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land, is answered. We can sing it because the Lord is right there with us.
Exactly. It transforms worship from a localized ritual that requires the temple to an ever-present relationship that survives destruction and distance. The You Need Faith in Jesus team uses this to remind us that God's presence is not contingent on our comfort or our circumstances. His presence is guaranteed by his promise, making every believer, wherever they are, a little sanctuary.
That moves us from despair to possibility.
It really does.
And the psalm pivots sharply again here. The conversation leaves the captors and moves to a solemn internal vow.
This is one of the most fierce pledges of loyalty in all of Scripture.
It's a self-curse that sets the ultimate stake on their commitment.
The intensity is staggering. The psalmist is essentially making a conditional oath that asks God to strip him of his God-given identity and function if he ever fails this test of loyalty.
Let's detail the components of the vow, starting with the full verse 5, Psalm 137, verse 5.
If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning.
And then verse 6 completes the pledge.
If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth, if I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy.
Let's break down the mechanics of that self-curse, the right hand's cunning. What is that?
It refers specifically to the skilled labor of the psalmist, likely his skill as a musician or a scribe, the function of creativity and productivity.
And the tongue cleaving to the roof of my mouth.
That's the loss of his ability to speak, sing, or communicate the truth of God. He is swearing, may I become functionally useless, may my God-given talents atrophy and fail if I ever forget the true purpose for which they were intended, which is Zion.
So it's a pledge of futility if he compromises. His skills will become useless if they are ever applied to Babylonian aims.
It's a terrifying severity. The danger in exile is assimilation, the slow, comfortable merging into the foreign culture until one forgets home entirely.
And this vow is designed to prevent that slow spiritual death.
By making the consequence immediate and severe, loss of identity and function.
And the culmination of the vow, if I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy, that's the most personal and challenging part of this entire oath.
It speaks directly to the seductive power of ease. Jerusalem, again, symbolized God's purposes, the covenant, the community. His chief joy represents his greatest source of earthly pleasure, comfort, wealth, or personal happiness.
So the pledge is absolute prioritization. I will never assimilate or find contentment in the fleeting luxuries of Babylon.
My allegiance to God's ultimate plan must exceed my pursuit of personal happiness. That's the heart of it.
And the analysis from the You Need Faith in Jesus team uses this as a foundational call to undivided loyalty.
They do. They clarify that for the modern believer, our Jerusalem is defined as Jesus Christ and his kingdom.
So this vow forces us to confront the state of our own hearts. Have we, through comfortable living or distraction, allowed modern Babylon, the world's fleeting promises, to become our chief joy?
It's the tension between temporal satisfaction and eternal commitment. The practical step derived here is a call for constant and ruthless self-examination.
The action is to set our affection on things above.
Exactly. Ensuring that our relationship with Christ, our commitment to his mission, and our longing for his return hold the undeniable highest priority in our life.
This loyalty mirrors the radical commitment demonstrated by the Apostle Paul.
Oh, absolutely. The You Need Faith in Jesus team draws a direct line to Paul's declaration in Philippians chapter 3, verse 8.
Can you read that for us?
He says, Yea, doubtless, and I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things.
That's a New Testament echo of the psalmist's vow. If all my earthly success and comforts, my chief joy, must be sacrificed to maintain the excellency of Christ's knowledge, so be it.
It's the ultimate statement of spiritual prioritization, and the depth of the psalmist's self-curse demonstrates the profound danger of complacency in exile. The "You Need Faith in Jesus" team application framework insists that nothing should rival Christ as our highest love.
Which makes this vow incredibly relevant to our comfortable, distraction-filled modern lives.
Incredibly.
We experience another massive tonal shift here. We move from sorrow and steadfast loyalty to a demanding, outraged cry for judgment.
Yes. The focus now shifts from the primary captors, Babylon, to a group whose actions were arguably more malicious, the Edomites.
Let's read verse 7, Psalm 137, verse 7.
Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, even to the foundation thereof.
This verse requires deep historical context to appreciate the depth of the betrayal.
It does. The Edomites were descended from Esau, the brother of Jacob, who was Israel. They were, by bloodline, a brother nation.
Which elevates their actions from typical national hostility to a profound act of familial treachery.
Deep treachery.
So what specifically did the Edomites do in the day of Jerusalem during the siege and destruction?
Our sources detail their specific malicious behavior. They didn't just stand idly by. They actively assisted the Babylonians. They blocked escape routes, captured and handed over fleeing Judahites.
And most hatefully, they cheered on the demolition of the city.
That's right. The phrase, raise it, meaning level it, completely shows they were demanding the Babylonians leave nothing standing. They delighted in the utter ruin of their kin.
It's the malice of kin which cuts so much deeper than the cruelty of the conqueror.
Absolutely. The conqueror acts according to its nature. The brother should act according to covenant and kinship. And this profound betrayal fueled the psalmist's outrage.
And he asks God to remember them. That request, remember, O Lord, is not a casual suggestion.
No, in scriptural terms, when the psalmist asks God to remember, it is a formal legal invocation for God to act righteously as a judge.
So he's not demanding personal revenge?
No, he's demanding that the cosmic judge hold the Edomites accountable for their specific acts of betrayal. And this teaches us a fundamental truth highlighted by the You Need Faith in Jesus team. God is a God of perfect justice. He sees and notes every act of cruelty, mockery, and betrayal.
Especially when it comes from intimate or unexpected sources.
Exactly.
This directly relates to the practical application for the modern believer facing injustice.
Yes, the practical step identified by the You Need Faith in Jesus team is to bring the entire messy, painful situation directly to God in prayer.
Our duty is to articulate the grievance honestly, but then to entrust the final vengeance and judgment entirely to Him.
We have to resist seeking personal retaliation or allowing bitterness to take root. God, the holy judge, holds the scales.
So we fully articulate the outrage, but we completely surrender the execution of the verdict.
That is the essential spiritual discipline. We acknowledge the wrong, pour out the raw emotion of betrayal, but leave the solution to God. And the You Need Faith in Jesus team grounds this insight in the fact that God demonstrably did remember this crime and dealt with it.
And the proof of God's judicial memory is confirmed through the prophet Obadiah.
Precisely. The source cites the very short prophetic book of Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 10.
Which says,
For thy violence against thy brother Jacob shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever.
And historical records confirm that Edom eventually disappeared as a nation.
It did. The prophecy was fulfilled. So the psalmist's prayer was not just acknowledged, it was answered perfectly.
Which should be an immense source of solace for any believer facing deep betrayal today.
It should. The You Need Faith in Jesus team emphasizes that our primary duty is not to repay evil for evil, but to trust implicitly that the cosmic accounting ledger is managed perfectly by God.
When we hand the judgment over, we are released from the burden of bitterness.
And we maintain our own spiritual peace, even as we demand justice from the divine court.
We have to now turn to the final two verses of the psalm, which are undoubtedly the most challenging, raw, and disturbing in all of Scripture.
This segment demands extreme caution. It must be immediately viewed through the indispensable lens of New Testament ethics.
These verses are the unvarnished human anguish resulting from witnessing and experiencing unimaginable systemic evil.
They are a prophetic declaration, not a personal action plan.
Let's read the full verses, recognizing the weight of the language. Verse 8 first, Psalm 137, verse 8.
O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us.
And then the harrowing verse 9.
Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones.
The source material is crucial here for theological and historical framing. That last image is horrifying.
It is, but it is entirely rooted in the historical reality of the time. The sources confirm that during the sack of Jerusalem, the Babylonians had executed similar atrocities, including the killing of Judean infants.
So this cry is a direct demand for measure justice.
What we refer to as the lex talionis applied internationally.
We should define lex talionis clearly here.
It's Latin for the law of retaliation, or an eye for an eye. It was a principle of justice designed historically to limit vengeance, not escalate it, by demanding the punishment fit the crime exactly.
So the psalmist is not inventing a cruelty. He is articulating a demand that the exact evil Babylon inflicted upon Jerusalem must be returned to them.
He witnessed it, and now he places the resulting prophetic fury entirely in God's hands. He is asking for the justice. He is not authorizing the action.
And the "You Need Faith in Jesus" team is so clear that for us, the modern believer, we cannot use this verse as a license for personal hatred or revenge.
That filtration is non-negotiable. Christ's command in the New Testament is absolute and foundational for our conduct.
We're talking about Matthew chapter 5, verse 44.
Yes, where Jesus states, "Love your enemies, bless them that curse you." This totally overrules any justification for personal malice, revenge, or violence against our own personal enemies, regardless of their actions.
Our context is grace and forgiveness. God's context is ultimate judgment.
Exactly.
So, if we are precluded from acting on this rage, what is the twofold application provided by the You Need Faith in Jesus team? What's the practical step here?
The first application is incredibly pastoral and liberating. This verse provides an honest voice to the outrage we feel in the face of pure, systemic evil. God is vast enough to handle our most primal, honest, and unvarnished emotions.
So we do not have to sanitize our pain before bringing it to the Lord.
No. That full, unvarnished honesty is the initial practical step.
That's a huge relief. We don't have to pretend we are not deeply wounded or angry at profound injustice.
And the second practical step is the ultimate theological surrender. This verse is a powerful reminder that God is a holy judge who will not let wickedness go unpunished.
So the action is to hand over the need for ultimate justice to him.
Trusting completely that all wrongs, especially those that human justice fails to correct, will be perfectly rectified at the final judgment.
The assurance is that there will be a final, perfect accounting.
It is. The You Need Faith in Jesus team connects this ancient cry for retribution to its final righteous fulfillment in God's ultimate judgment on the wicked global system, often called Babylon in Revelation.
And that connection is essential for tying the Old Testament anguish to the New Testament resolution.
Yes. The ultimate fulfillment is described in Revelation chapter 18, verse 6, when the command is issued to the heavenly forces. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works.
This confirms that the severe justice the psalmist demanded is reserved for the apocalyptic judgment of God against the great wicked structures that oppose him.
It is God's war, his justice, and the execution is his alone. It lifts the burden of revenge entirely from the believer's shoulders. The psalm's ending is prophetic and theological, not a manual for Christian conduct.
Our role is love and forgiveness toward our personal enemies.
And God's role is perfect, ultimate justice. We trust him to manage that distinction perfectly.
Wow. This has been a profound, difficult, and essential journey through Psalm 137. We've traced the spiritual map of exile, from grief to loyalty to the surrender of vengeance.
It is a journey that validates the deepest human pain while rigorously demanding the highest spiritual loyalty. And we are so grateful to the You Need Faith in Jesus team for providing this clear, actionable framework for applying this text.
Let's quickly synthesize those core application points, the key takeaways from the You Need Faith in Jesus team that move this psalm from history into urgent practical faith for you, the listener.
First, validate sorrow. Don't fear the tears of exile. Be brutally honest with God about your pain. Psalm 137, verse 1 gives you divine permission to sit down and weep.
Second, guard the song. Your worship is sacred and is reserved for God alone. Don't profane it by turning it into a performance for the world's cynical amusement. Remember the profound protest of the silent harps.
Third, maintain loyalty. Christ must be unequivocally your chief joy, above all worldly comforts or distractions. Conduct that hard examination daily to ensure modern Babylon hasn't replaced your highest affection for the kingdom.
And finally, surrender retribution. When betrayal or grave injustice strikes, bring that raw outrage to God in prayer, but leave the final judgment and vengeance entirely to him.
This ancient song of exile ultimately leads us not to bitterness, but to enduring hope. Despite the initial weeping by the rivers of Babylon, their fierce, uncompromised loyalty preserved their identity until the day of their restoration. The memory of Zion was their anchor.
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over. Psalm 137 shows that external captivity tried to strip away their identity, but their unwavering internal vow saved them.
So the question for you is,
What are the visible and invisible signs of your spiritual loyalty, your personal Jerusalem, that remain strong, prioritized, and non-negotiable, even when you feel like you are wandering far from home? The promise of Christ's return is our ultimate certainty. Let it define our chief joy today.